I have done all the things that I had set out to do and more, but now what? Right? It was that now what experience. And it's so true that it really is such an internal game. And I've seen this in my life a number of times. Every time I had made a shift, even when I had started my agency and I was like, I will only work with conscious, impact driven women in media and entertainment. And then all of these A-list powerhouses kind of came in. And I did not market to them. I did not reach out to them. It literally came inbound in my inbox. And I think when we get so clear internally and that internal shift happens in a non-negotiable way, the world manifests around you.
All right, welcome back to Euphoric Evolution. I am here with Heather Catania, and oh my gosh, are you in for an absolute treat? I'm so excited to have you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm so good. It's Monday. We're kicking off the week, but I got a workout and a meditation in this morning. So I'm 2 for 2.
Yes, I love that. I got into some homeschooling this morning. So we are getting into the groove of homeschool. And of course, I got to get better about really sharing that stuff because that's somebody's dream. Sometimes I really forget that, like, hey, this is my everyday norm, but this is someone's dream. Anyway,
Right.
We are living the dream.
Yes. Sure. And you get to homeschool your son, which is,
1000%. What a blessing. So I want to start with a little bit about your story. You've had such a fascinating career up to this point. This is nowhere near the end. You're really just getting started. But I would love to hear a little bit of background, starting with your experience in corporate and your transition then into entrepreneurship.
So I really got my start my dream when I was a teenager was to work at a magazine. So this is sort of in the early 2000s. And I thought the most glamorous job that you could have on earth was working at a magazine. And that was sort of my singular track goal. And I was so tenacious about getting my foot in the door. I'm not from a family that has connections. I'm not from a wealthy family. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. So I just really knew that my tenacity and my sort of focus and ambition was going to get me to where I wanted to be. So I wanted to work for a magazine called Paper. I stalked the intern coordinator, like literally stalked, like wrote her letters, wrote her emails on my AOL. I, just eventually just showed up at the door and was like, hi, this is me. I'm here. Obviously, all of those emails and letters went unanswered. I think I sent probably around 35 messages. And I showed up at the door and I met with the intern coordinator and got my foot in the door to work at this magazine as an unpaid intern. My parents were furious. I was working sort of 2 jobs. But I was like, if I can just get my foot in the door, I know that I can go places. I know people will see my work. I know I'll be seen. I'm also a mental projector 4/6. So being seen, right, is when you attract invitation. So I just was like, if I can just get my foot in the door. And I interned at Paper for about 2 years. I worked almost 20 hours a day for free on photo shoots. And I was just like, this is my dream. I'm just so excited. I was just so excited to be there. And it was definitely like a Devil Wears Prada moment where everyone was very, not the nicest, not the most kind, but I was just so excited to do the grunt work, honestly. And essentially I, continued to intern at this magazine. And then somebody delivered a gift basket for the magazine I really wanted to work at, which was called Nylon. They delivered a gift basket to Paper's office. And I said, Nylon's office was down the street. So I was like, I'll walk this gift basket into Nylon's office because I just wanted to see the office. I'm 20 years old at this point. And I opened the door and someone that I sort of knew from high school, not very well, but just recognized me. And she worked there. And I was just literally dropping off this gift basket. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm interning, at Paper down the street. She goes, well, would you want to intern here? We're looking for interns. So I immediately said yes. And I interned there for about 3 weeks before I got hired as the assistant to the editor-in-chief. So I started sort of that way. And, it was very serendipitous, but I just worked so hard. And I think I learned at that time too, that the harder I worked, the more hours I put in, the more I hustled, the more I just, put my head down and worked, the faster I would ascend through that ladder. And I worked 20 hours a day. I didn't have, a lot of my friendships and relationships really sort of went down the drain, other than the people that I was working with at the magazine. I spent all of my time with them. I just worked, all the time. And, and as I worked, I started to see rewards, because I was I took the job when I was 21. I put in sort of a year and a half. I was promoted to editor by the time I was 22. And then I was sort of poached to Condé Nast and went and worked at various Condé Nast and Hearst titles, Elle, Harper's Bazaar. When I got the job at Harper's, it was like my dream, because I either wanted to work at Harper's or Vogue. And, I was one of the youngest editors at Hearst and Condé Nast at the time. And again, I was just working and working and working, and that was just my life. And, the harder I worked and the more that I gave up my own life, the more successful I got. So the more I was praised by my team, the more I was praised by my higher ups, the editors. They were like, look how hard this person works. She's a machine. And through that, I thought I was, really living my dream. And I was happy on one level, because the vision that I had for myself and the vision that I had to really be a photo editor, photo director at these massive titles where it's, those offices are one of the hardest rooms to break in. I kind of came to a point 3 or 4 years in, and I was like, these people that are older than me that are working here at the top, they just look so unhappy. They look so unhappy. They're always looking over their shoulder. Who's going to screw them over? Who's going to take their job? It was very cutthroat. And I was like, once I sort of achieved what I wanted to achieve, I had this moment where I was like, is this really what I want my life to look like? Is this really what I want my life to be? And at the time, this was really, right at the break of digital. Like, blogs were obviously around, and this is the time of like The Hills and Perez Hilton and like that kind of time. I think, Facebook obviously and Twitter had launched, I believe, but Instagram wasn't around, TikTok wasn't around. It was just a very different world. And to consume news about culture, fashion, you had to, it all came from these platforms. They sort of ran the fashion industry. They ran the entertainment industry. And when digital started to happen, I was like, I feel like there's something else. And I feel like there's something else meant for me, especially because I was like, something about this doesn't feel right. And, and I was producing the most beautiful photo shoots with Peter Limberg and, and going to Couture Week in Paris Fashion Week and going backstage and traveling the world. And, and it was a really beautiful experience. And I really wouldn't trade that time for anything. But I just had this calling where I was like, there's something else. There's something else. And that's sort of when I transitioned away from fashion publishing, and I moved to LA, and I just sort of went off on my own, and I was sort of doing various projects that were really sort of run by celebrities. I produced a show by Demi Moore that sort of kind of came to me through my network. And I was like, wow, TV production is really fun. Building a digital extension of this TV show is really fun. And this project that I specifically did with Demi was all about women. We sort of interviewed 35 A-list women, from Alicia Keys to Lady Gaga to Jane Fonda, Miley Cyrus, Donna Karan, these amazing women. And it was just stories about their life. We one rule on the show was that we couldn't promote any projects or talk about any work. We wanted to talk about them personally. Like Gwyneth Paltrow came on and talked about the loss of her father and how that's when she finally wanted to get married. It was just more emotional and personal things. And this storytelling like really lit a fire in me. There was something about it that had this depth that I had been lacking for a really long time. And I was just so interested to help people tell their stories. And at the time, it was specifically around talent. And so after I wrapped this project, I decided to, I did a couple of jobs in between. I, worked for another magazine and was sort of like, not shifting out of that identity of a magazine editor. And eventually I started my own agency, somewhat accidentally, because one of my friends who was on a very popular TV show was like, "You've been telling me to get on social media for years." And I just kept sort of bugging him. And he became my first client because I couldn't really explain like what he was like, "Tell me what to do. I'll take you to dinner. Just tell me what to do." And I couldn't explain it. So I was like, "Let me just do it for you. Let me do it with you." And then, he became the first client at my agency, which I didn't even know was going to be an agency at the time. I was like, I'll just become a freelance social media manager. And that was sort of the birth of my agency. And, now I've sort of grown this agency to be one of the most coveted, digital agencies in Los Angeles. And I went from there to, having a couple of clients, finding my way, not being an entrepreneur. I always had a full-time job, and I worked in, corporate magazines, to having to learn how to run a business, how to run business with celebrity talent and some of, the biggest names in the world, and learning how to run social media platforms, learning how to monetize social media platforms, doing brand deals, working with studios and shows and all of the things. And it was a whole side of the business that I didn't know. I don't think really the industry knew either, because it was very early, in the time of social media. And that's sort of how my agency was born.
Oh my gosh. So that's incredible. Number one, listen, I created an unpaid internship for myself, but I can't imagine having done it for multiple years unpaid, especially while also holding down a job. Insane, right? But for you, you had this vision from childhood, right? So you were seeking that. And then ultimately that led you into just kind of following the threads to doing done for you / done with you type of work. And I think that this brings us to kind of the point where you and I met, right? So it's been a couple years now since we met and you came into Synarchy. So tell me a little bit about, because your career overall is what so many, especially young women, but also there are some young men who, that is the ultimate dream career, right? To have worked for all of these magazines and then to move up into the role of being an editor at a well-established, well-known magazine, especially back then, like even more so than now. It was so coveted. And then to move into creating an agency where you're working with celebrity clientele. Can you tell us a little bit about what was that experience like, and how did that really catalyze you into connecting with me? Like, where does that bridge happen?
Okay, so once I created my agency, that was really, again, my first venture into entrepreneurship. I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. And I went to a dinner and ended up sitting across from a business coach. And we just started, we got to talking, and she basically, told me, "Well, what if you were able to turn your annual salary into your monthly salary?" Now, I never even fathomed that question. Like, I didn't even know that that was possible. I thought that like the most money I could ever make was like $200,000 a year. That to me was an enormous sum of money. I never really thought that I could ever earn beyond that. And again, this happened very serendipitously. Like at the time, that I started my agency and I started to understand, wow, I actually have agency over my financial life in a new way. And it was such a shift in mindset for me that I was like, oh, wow, I could actually, if I sign, 5 clients at $3,000 a month, like I just started to do the math. It just became a math equation for me. And so I just, instead of focusing on the type of person I wanted to work with, I just was like going for the 6-figure month. But in that, I had worked with some other mentors. Like before I came to you, Makhosi, I had worked with some other mentors, and they kept looking at my business and they're like, you have a wildly successful business. What's wrong with you? Don't abandon this. Look at these people you work with. They were sort of looking at the shiny objects and not really understanding how I was feeling internally. So, and I'll just tell you sort of where I was, and but I'll sort of share with everyone. But I kept refining the type of clients that I worked with. And, in the beginning, I was just sort of working with anyone and just whoever came my way. And, it felt very out of alignment. So I kept just readjusting the way I was doing it and who I was doing it with. And this really comes into the conversation of really working with aligned clients and ideal clients, because I didn't even know what an ideal client was at the time. I was just taking it on. And I got really clear. I think this is probably about 2018-ish. I was like, I want to work with impactful women in media. I always knew I wanted to work with women. I always wanted to give women a voice. I always wanted to storytell with women. And I said, to work with my agency, you have to not want to be famous. If someone comes to me and is like, I want 12 million followers, that is not the kind of person I take on. Yes, that is always a byproduct of what we do together. My clients grow exponentially. However, that's not the goal. The goal is impact. The goal is storytelling. The goal is, having conversations around mental health, spirituality, like making the world better in some capacity. And I got very, very clear about that. And once I just got clear about that internally, these powerhouse women came into my life. I got an email from Priyanka Chopra Jonas wanting to work together, who's extremely philanthropic. She's a global president. She's a UNICEF ambassador. Taraji P. Henson came into my life, who has an incredible mental health foundation, Oscar-nominated woman. Ashley Tisdale came into my life, who wanted to start this sort of little sister to Goop that was, a wellness platform for millennials and Gen Z. So all of these women started kind of coming to me with these amazing projects that were really sort of game changing in the world. And I was really excited. So again, I just started to sign them, and I was so excited. I was fans of these women. I really loved to see these women, how they showed up in the world. And I was just signing talent. And I will say, inside of a celebrity business, there is the person, and then they have all of these brand extensions. And they're also doing, social media, especially as we went into the pandemic. Social media was really their main source of revenue with brand deals and, all of the things. So one person is almost like running 10 accounts because there's just so much to do. It's really a full-time job for 3 people per person. And I just started, as we went into the pandemic, I launched 15 brands in Sephora, Target, Walmart. I mean, every major retailer, all driven, all talent led. And my agency went from social media to product launching, product development, just community building, the whole thing. And my scope, which started out as one thing, just kept expanding. Every scope was like 10x what it sort of was at the beginning, which is also like a natural byproduct of growth. But I was so burnt out. I was working, again, 20 hours a day. My team was working 24/7. It was COVID. So it was like we were all in our houses. We couldn't leave. We couldn't get together as a team. We were on Zoom 15 hours a day. It was just really intense. And I started to feel like, I have this roster of incredible women that I've worked so hard to, align with, and it just doesn't feel good anymore. It just doesn't, this doesn't feel good. And when I would talk to other mentors, they would say, are you insane? Like, who has these kind of clients? Who is able to sort of like pull these people in and work with them? Shouldn't you be happy? Like, is there another way you can do it? And they just told me to keep going with my business as it was, and just, hire more team, just like throw more team at the problem. Or my profit margin started to really dwindle. And again, the burnout was real, because there are certain things that my team can do, but there's a lot of things that I have to do as a business owner and sort of as the leader of this company. And I was just really burnt out. And we were, I think for me, I really wanted to hit 6 figures a month. I hit that goal and then some. I went over. I went from making, like 250,000 a year to 500,000 a year to 700,000 to 900,000. And then I was at 1.4 during the like early COVID in 2020. And I just felt so out of alignment. And so in 2021, I found you and came to you and really shared with you about this business. And I had a lot of grief too, because I knew it wasn't sustainable, and I knew I would have to reimagine it somehow or let some piece of it go. And it was like my baby. It was this baby that I had built and cultivated for so long. And I had worked so hard, but I just knew that there was something else. I wanted more space. I became an entrepreneur because I wanted the freedom. That's why we all become entrepreneurs, right? We want freedom. We want autonomy over our time, want autonomy over our money. And my profit margins were horrible. My team was burnt out. I was burnt out. It just felt like a wildfire. And my clients were happy, but I was very unhappy. And so that's when I came to you and started working with you. That's when I found Synarchy. And it was really so life-changing for me.
Can you share a little bit? Because I love how you share that really you were living on the surface, right? What from the outside looking in, this business that is over $1 million a year, working with celebrity clients, doing really great work. It's not that you were doing something that you hated doing, right? You were doing great work. But ultimately, for you, it was boiling down to freedom and feeling burnt out and misaligned, knowing that this wasn't something that you could do for the rest of your life in the way that you were doing it. What were some of the shifts that you needed to make in order to let go? Because it was, I mean, I witnessed it, right? There were so many days when you were like, Makhosi, like, what is this? Right. And the emotions of that, what were some of those shifts that you had to make emotionally, as well as in your mindset or in your identity?
It's such a great question. I mean, it was tough because I really loved my clients. Like, again, these are women that I respect beyond, and I love being in proximity to them. And for me, it felt like such a gift. It felt like I had been handed a gift, because these women could have worked with anyone in the world, and they chose to work with me and my team. And that was a lot. That's a lot of responsibility, and I take that very seriously. And I always love to over deliver. And but it came down to not even being able to go to dinner without my phone going off with some sort of, it was just a fire drill after fire drill that, people, obviously stuff in the press, cancel culture, things coming out. I mean, it's just never ending, especially again, as we went into the pandemic, and my nervous system was blown out. My nervous system was just obliterated. And I think it also, and something that you had said to me that was really eye-opening, was you asked me this question, when have you ever taken a rest? And I really looked back, and my response to you was, I haven't taken a rest in 15 years, because I went from hustling in this internship, graduating college, and, to going to this corporate job where I worked 20 hours a day, sometimes would sleep at the office, to, moving to LA and just doing more of the same, and then running, a multi-million-dollar agency. I just never stopped and took a break in between, ever. I have worked on every vacation I've ever taken in the past 10 years. I've never really unplugged. And so that was really where I started to ask myself the question, because I wanted to burn my agency to the ground. I was like, I will just go be a florist at this point. I want to do anything but this, honestly. However, I really loved my work. Like, I love storytelling. I love brand messaging. I love working with people. I mean, there was so much of it that I loved, but that I started to hate because it was so out of alignment. And it was also just, again, the deliverables and the to-dos were just way too much. It was almost like having, it was working inside of 10 full-fledged brands where I was almost an employee of those 10 full-fledged brands, right? And my identity really had to shift out of like being a social media manager or a celebrity social media manager to an entrepreneur. And I really shifted from celebrity social media manager to brand architect and entrepreneur. So I got really clear. I started to think about, what are the things that I really love about this work? What effect can I really cause? What transformation can I wholeheartedly deliver? And what can I get my energy behind? Because I was so depleted of energy. For me, it was like energy is my most valuable currency. So I was so depleted of energy. I was like, what is energy giving? Like, what is actually going to fill me up? And I really let everything go. I let everything fall away except that. And that really is the piece of, brand architects, because I have built so many successful celebrity brands. There's, a lot of brands that, you guys see in Target or Sephora, I've worked behind, I've consulted on and really sort of brought to life. And I loved that alchemy part. I loved bringing something that was an idea from someone sitting across from me into physical form and into reality. And I love when clients see success. I'm very, success driven. Again, I'm a projector, so success is, it's important to me. But that was really the identity shift. And when I talked to you too, you started to position, you mirrored for me what that could look like. And I had so much resistance. Remember, I was like, they're not going to buy that from me. Like, that's not what they really need. They really need the social media piece. And like, I don't know if I can do this piece and not have the social media piece. I was so I was really like a martyr, because I was almost like overly mothering my clients. I felt so responsible for every single thing. And you really helped me shift out of that identity. And that's sort of the place where I'm playing now. And it's amazing. It's been life-changing, honestly.
I specifically remember this period of time where there was so much resistance coming up for you around the possibility that there could be another way, a way in which you are able to do the thing that you love and simultaneously honor your needs for rest, your needs for unplugging. And not only that, that there would be people out there who would so value that, right? Like you shared, it felt like such an honor and such a gift to have been chosen. But I remember really like hammering for you. Yes, we can be grateful for the things that come into our life. And simultaneously, when you know your genius, when you're really able to get clear on your essence and what that's bringing into the world, understanding that that is a gift for others, right? Really shifting your mindset around being the one who is just like humble and grateful into no, actually it's a blessing to them to have you.
Mm-hmm.
not just the other way around. And ultimately, right, you want it to be mutual, where there's like this mutual respect and this mutual co-creation of you and the people that you're working with creating magic together. But
Mm-hmm.
there was for sure a lot of, um, there were so many shifts that you made in regards to letting go of, the version of you that was uh, that unpaid intern, just grateful to be in the room, right? To
Yeah.
running the room and being the rock star in the
Mm-hmm.
room.
Yeah, that was such a big one. And again, I always felt so grateful. And I think this is also this really taps into the wealth identity as well, because I remember sitting in my house and, having a $1.4 million a year, making seven figures. And I always thought if I made enough money, if I made $1 million, which seemed like such a massive number at the time, I would be happy. My problems would be solved. Everything would be right in the world. And then I hit that goal and it just wasn't, it felt like, sort of when I became a senior editor at Harper's Bazaar and I was like sitting in my office in the Hearst building. And I remember it was snowing and I was looking out the window at Central Park and I was like, I have done all the things that I had set out to do and more. But now what? Right? It was that now what experience. And it's so true that it really is such an internal game, because as soon as I made that shift internally, and I had seen this in my life a number of times. Every time I had made a shift, even when I had started my agency and I was like, I will only work with conscious, impact driven women in media and entertainment. And then all of these A-list powerhouses kind of came in. And I did not market to them. I did not reach out to them. It literally came inbound in my inbox. And I think when we get so clear internally and that internal shift happens in a non-negotiable way, the world manifests around you, right? It was really like a shape shifting, because when you and I had that conversation and I was shifting out of that identity of like celebrity social media manager who is grateful to have the clients and who should just be, put her head down and do the work, even when it was in- intense scope creep, no recognition of boundaries whatsoever. A team member even had to tell me that she almost got into a car accident because one of our celebrity clients was calling her obsessively while she was driving on the freeway. And this can be the reality of working with celebrity talent that are used to, yes people and not having boundaries. And it was like this kind of come to Jesus moment where I was just like, this has to change. I was so affected by, that story of thinking that a team member was in personal jeopardy, and that's really where I got so clear, obviously with your guidance and mentorship, and everything around me started to change. Three of the most, I would say, noisy clients, two I gave notice to, one gave me notice. And because I had been telling her, you really need a full-time person, you need a full-time employee. And I transitioned, three of my celebrity clients over to that format. And I stayed on for strategy. And it works really well because we're not doing execution and we're really playing a role. And the number of hours diminished, but the impact increased. And again, this is what I didn't even know was possible, because I thought if I pulled back, right, my clients would all go away. And some of them did, but they were quickly replaced. I remember I told you that, and this was all sort of when I was in the void of, I felt like I was in this chrysalis, right? Like I just felt like goo. I felt like my entire identity, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know who I wanted to go after. I was so burnt out. I didn't even really want to work anymore. I mean, I felt disoriented. Um, but I think my love for branding, my love for, aesthetics and beauty and really wanting to have impact and change really just, I told you that this massive client found me off of a Google search and signed what started out as a $300,000 contract, But then 4 other brand extensions of this one company has now come in, and now it's a $750,000 contract, really just from one client. And that was massive evidence for me, like through our work. I was like, oh, Makhosi was right. There is a way.
There is a way. And also it can be, I just remember that moment being so even just beyond what you thought was possible, right? Like you had in your mind, if I could just do strategy for these clients, that would be great, right? But let alone such a level up in the impact that you are making and how you are actually working with them is absolutely incredible. So I'm curious about in kind of practical terms, right? What does your life look like now versus 2 years ago?
It's drastically different. Drastically. I really have so much more autonomy over my time. And you would always tell me, when you want to speed up, just rest. Just rest and it will come. And I was always trying to control. I was like, but, I need to make this amount of money to sustain my team and to, all of it. I had like a problem for every solution. That's probably how I'd phrase it. And I just rested so much more. And, it's funny because again, as soon as I got clear, the world just started to really mirror it back to me. I still get calls from celebrity clients and they come to me for strategy because they're like, I have someone on my team, or I have an assistant doing social for me, or, so they come to me asking for strategy because I shifted my brand messaging. I shifted, again, the way I'm sort of working in the world. I am recruiting social hires for people that really need it because everyone really needs it. And everyone, needs excellent people. And since I know that role so well, the recruiting process has been like seamless. And again, everyone is happy. We're finding, new jobs for people. We're serving talent and, high net worth individuals and people like that with full-time social hires. So it was a lot of micro shifts along the way, but I think it was really also the evidence of just having it show up in the world. So now I am only I do sort of 2 things. One is strategy. So social strategy, brand strategy. Brand strategy really sits at the top because once you have your brand strategy down, your social strategy is just becomes like a wellspring. And then I do branding, which is, logo design, whole brand guideline build out, and web design as well. And so really kind of focusing on, or, product development and things like that. So those are sort of the 2 buckets in which I work. And I just have so much more space. And I also have so much more space to really give my clients because I have the creative space. And when I'm thinking about them or working with them, I have so much more capacity to like deliver to them. And so, because my work is so much about who I'm working with. Relationships are so important to me. I love every single one of my clients. And so having that space has just increased my capacity to pour into them more, and also nurturing myself.
It's so important. I kind of got lumped in with a lot of feminine energy coaches, and I've been spending some time trying to be very clear that I'm not actually just a feminine energy coach. We also have men, and really I bring both. I try to bridge both. It's just that so many people who find me in the world have been so on one extreme. They've been so in their yang energy that now, in order to access more of their potential, in order to actually create the freedom that they want, in order to actually be at peak performance consistently and sustainably, they have to really access this yin energy. And I remember for you, there was just so much time that you were spending in the doing when your genius is really connected to your creativity.
Mhm.
And it sounds very counterintuitive that, oh, actually, for
Mhm.
you, if you want to make more money, have more freedom,
Yeah.
create greater impact in the world, so on and so forth, that you needed to tap into the yin energy, which is where your creativity lies. And also,
Mhm.
rest lies there, right? And those incredible ideas and visions and beautiful designs and big
Mhm.
picture thinking can only happen
Mhm.
when we actually unplug, when we actually disconnect. It's like one of the greatest gifts that you can give to these clients is you well
Mhm.
rested and
Mhm.
re-energized and really at your best. But it's kind of hard when we live in a world and a society that says, no,
Mhm.
actually the only way is
Mhm.
to do
Mhm.
more, right? Do more stuff.
Right. And the doing is, we always think that we need something in order to receive. Like, if I have a big fancy website, then I will get the clients I want, right? All of the things, there's so many things that we think that we need. And the other thing too that I recognized, and this was sort of a big shift for me, and this is why I'm so obsessed with working on brands for women and working with more coaches, conscious leaders, female entrepreneurs specifically, is because rest is so important for women and creative people and people that are really like impacting the world and making change, right? Like doing the Lord's work. We I became very clear that having a brand that really exudes your essence, your authenticity, the like my brand has spoken for me in ways that I didn't need to. Like it has done the speaking for me. It has done the work for me so I don't always have to show up, over explain myself, spend my time selling, spend my time connecting with people, spend my time, you know, um, earning their trust, right? Like there's certain things I started to put tools in place and systems in place that really nurtured my energy, really nurtured my essence. And that's what I really became so clear that I wanted to teach other people because that are second nature to us are not second nature to other people, right? And that's what I really have to constantly remind myself. I'm like, oh, everyone does this because it's just right. That could be like your normal. That is sort of what I moved into as well because I was spending so much of my time just doing for others and doing for celebrities, right? And pouring all of my energy into them. And I had realized I had actually built a really successful business. I really switched my identity from corporate doer to entrepreneur. And so it really lights me up to share those gifts too versus not having the time to and not having the time to work with other people. It's just again, like when you rest and sort of when I let go of a lot of the noise, I realized that there's like a whole other demographic of people that I really wanted to help and really work with and help pour into in a new way.
I'm so excited to see you doing more of that work. Not that the work with public figures and bigger entities doesn't matter. However, our gifts can be applied in so many different ways. And I think what we really stand for in this world, when applied to different levels of the system, right, can create incredible change. So, let's talk about your genius a little bit, right? We've got some time left to dive into. From your perspective, you are really staying on the cutting edge of where we are going with technology, where we're
Mhm.
going in marketing, what
Mhm.
really is this next level or the not so distant future, right? Because
Yeah.
especially with AI, we are
Mhm.
seeing it happen. What do you feel like is one of the biggest shifts that needs to happen for entrepreneurs, conscious entrepreneurs, even starting out in their early days, what is the key shift that needs to happen in order for, number one, them to have the kind of business that they actually want, that creates that freedom that they want, that allows for them to be in their genius, and simultaneously creates the greatest impact?
Yeah, such a good question. I really believe in the power of community. And I think if you do one thing as an entrepreneur, double down on community. And community is fostered by a series of micro actions. It's not, if you ask any successful entrepreneur who has, a million followers on social, or maybe a community of a million people, they didn't just get there in a day, right? It's just such a series of micro actions, but it's about really pouring into community and fostering community. If you can really help one person, which then will become 3 people, which then will become 20, which then will become 100, 1,000, etc. Double down on community. And the best way to deliver to community and double down on them is through brand. Your brand, like I always say to people, don't build a brand, build a world. Brands that really think about building a world and not to future trip for anybody, but just really starting that in the most micro way. If you think of like Disney or Marvel or, J.K. Rowling or Oprah, like Oprah doesn't have a business. She has a world, right? And again, she didn't get there in one day. She's been doing this for, 30 years or whatever it's been. But that is where your brand will help you build a world. It will help establish trust to your community. It will show your community that you care about them, that you are doing the work behind the scenes, that you are researching and you are, doing all the things and embodying that identity too, that is going to help guide them and mentor them. And that's really where like your brand can really grow exponentially. And whether you want to launch digital products, coaching practice, physical products, launch a podcast, a YouTube, like whatever that looks like, that is where just doubling down on community and growing and fostering community of people that really want to learn something in a specific niche. They want to be transformed in a certain way. And then that's where I would start.
I love this so much because now I'm looking back on my life, and I've existed in some very different niches, right? A decade ago now at this point, I was in direct sales, right? Really supporting women in their sexual health. And ultimately then transitioning into doing a lot of marketing. I was marketing behind the scenes a lot. And now I'm in this place where I'm supporting incredible leaders and also starting to support some earlier stage, right? Some coming into the world conscious entrepreneurs in this bridge between the energetic and the strategic. And I think for me, what's really allowed a lot of that pivoting is that I started from day one building a community. And that community was not just based on what I did. It was based on who I was, right? Who I am at my core, at my essence. So how can someone create a brand that's in alignment with their essence so that when life happens, when things change, when their interests change, when they're, you know, shoot, just being a mom, like the stages that I've gone through with him being a toddler versus now where he's 10 and I'm homeschooling, it's a very different world. And so I've had to pivot and change, in the way that I offer things has had to shift, as well as clearly I transform a lot. But how can someone even begin to create a brand that's in alignment with their essence to attract that community?
What I've found in working inside of so many personal brands, physical brands, talent-driven brands, all of the things, I find one sort of common thread. People really buy three things from you: energy, confidence, and permission. Those are the three things that when we strip everything away, that's what people are really buying into across the map. You are the conduit of that. You are the one that's going to deliver those three things to your community. And listen, the point of life is to change. Like, if we saw someone not evolve, we would think that they were a robot. There would be questions. Like, it would just be weird. We need to see people evolve because we are also evolving. And I think throughout your evolution and transformation, energy, confidence, permission, keep that as the through line of your brand messaging, your communication, your delivery, because those three things are what people need throughout their own evolution and transformation. They will never not need those three things. And when you build a community, right, when you're delivering content, you can deliver content by graphics that really hit home, and the graphics too, or the content really should, I find it's very resonant when you are saying things, giving people language to something that they feel but they can't articulate. If you have the ability to do that again and again and again, your brand will always be successful in every iteration. Whether you're on video, you're doing lives, you don't need to do all the things. It's the potency, it's the brand potency that will win every time. And giving people the language to feel what they, to really articulate their feelings, to articulate, what's in resonance with them. Sometimes, especially in this space of thought leadership, we're all feeling things that we don't even have language for, right? Like, look at the conversation around mental health. Like, we didn't have that sort of language 10 years ago. I never knew it. My nervous system even was 10 years ago, right? So that is that will be one of the stickiest parts of your brand as you evolve and transform.
That's been, I could say, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most impactful things that I've done. Like, when I came out and I started talking about the void, and I am not the first person to use the word void. However, I for sure put my mark on that word in really describing in a very visceral way of like how it feels to be in the void and what it looks like, what your day looks like, and created this level or this understanding that I could then hand over to people about, like, this is what's going on in your life. This is why you're feeling this, and this is why this is happening, and so on and so forth. And people immediately were like, oh my gosh, I feel so seen. I feel so understood. This is where I belong, right?
Yes.
Ultimately, brand is about identity, right? It's about who you see yourself as or who you desire to see yourself as. But it does start with really connecting with where people are and then showing them, actually, this is what's possible. And then, like you said, the confidence, giving them the confidence that, like, hey, it's not just me.
That 100%. And also, sometimes the confidence is to just talk about the mess. We know that social media is such a highlight reel. Everyone is showing up perfectly all the time. We're bombarded with this 7-figure business. This is how much money I made this month. This is what I'm, getting engaged on a yacht in Italy, whatever it is, right? And there's this whole other side of transparency and authenticity, right? Where we can embrace failure and just have the courage to just step in and be the embodiment, right? People also buy into your embodiment because you might be showing up in a way that they are too afraid, right? We all have so much fear, especially when we are on our journey, and it's not even just when we start out. I have fear. We all have fear. There's always some level where we're like, oh my gosh, like, is that dream is so big. Do I deserve to even, like, is that even possible for me? Right. So there's so much fear in every iteration, at every peak of the mountain as we're climbing. There's so much fear. And your embodiment and just having the bravery and having the courage to be like, this is it, full stop, is almost just enough.
Yes. I shared in Voxer, I think it was last week, that, there were so many of the royals going through, you all really do have very similar experiences at the same time, right? It's like these kind of collective community transformations that happen, and also evidences that start showing up, which is always really fun and fascinating to kind of watch those fractals play out. And I shared with all of you that, listen, I have temper tantrums all the time about my identity as a spiritual teacher and showing up as a woman of color in wealth and the expectations and all of the things. And sometimes I have my own internal battles around, well, do I really have to? Can't I just go back to marketing behind the scenes for people instead of having to be the face of something, right? I have my own temper tantrums, and it's so funny because it can be so normalized to have those experiences for yourself, right?
That's right.
That we second guess the importance of that for someone else, right? But it's so necessary for people to hear it from your mouth and see it. And listen, I am guilty. I'm working on this. I'm like, how can I share more of that? Which is why I've been, sharing my journey, and why I'm going to be sharing about everyone's journey and these like very common fears that we have and that we get to work through. One last question though. How does someone do that with a product?
With a physical product brand, or like a digital brand?
Like a physical product brand, like where you are not a personal brand, or you are not the face of something. How can someone still apply some of those ideas or concepts into a physical product representation?
Again, when it comes to physical products, I always come back to like, build a world, not a brand. Like Walt Disney built Disneyland. Mickey Mouse became the face. That is an invention of his mind and imagination that became the face of his world, right? That's one example. I also think about when it comes to product brand, it's just, I would say packaging, like a problem that you solve. Like Sarah Blakely, for example, when she created Spanx, like those are two, like, yes, she is the face of Spanx in some way as like the female entrepreneur, billionaire, like owns 100% equity, or owned 100% equity in her brand. But Spanx was autonomous, like aside from Sarah, right? But she was so clear in the problem that she wanted to solve in the industry and how she wanted to solve that. She was a client of mine. And, when I was asking her questions about her story, she's like, I just wanted to wear white pants to a barbecue. It's like, I just wanted to wear white pants. And of course, it's so much bigger than that, right? But it's simple in her desire to solve a problem for women. And that's where brand really comes in too, because you're creating a world, and when you create a world, it can be separate from you. Of course, people like to know like who's behind it. But again, like Sarah's face was not like Spanx was going to sell without her face having to be attached.
Okay, that makes absolute sense to me. And you're sharing Sarah's name, and there will for sure be people who do not know who Sarah Blakely is, but we know Spanx, right?
Yes, exactly.
And because she's done such a great job at that. I love that she just wanted to wear white pants. I'm like, oh, we love Spanx because we just don't want to have the apron.
The muffin top,
the muffin top in our pants, right?
Yeah, exactly. And again, she wanted women to feel confident in their bodies and accentuate and again have the confidence to do anything, right? Like Spanx is a physical product, but like what is really the energy behind that? She's selling confidence. And so when you're launching or you're creating a physical product, like you can think about, what is the transformation? What is the energy? What is the problem that you want to solve and who you're solving it for? And that can be really autonomous from your face, but also, be your creation. It's like your alchemy.
Oh, this has been absolutely epic. I just have to tell you, I've adored having you around and it's been amazing to just witness your transformation. And it gets me so excited to really see you step into ultimately this version of yourself that is not completely from scratch. Like you knew she was in there, but to now see you really embodying her and of course showing up on a podcast interview, which I'm like so excited about you on podcast interviews. I'm so excited. So, where can people find you if they want to be a part of your world?
Yes. So you can find me at my website is called wearefirsthouse.com. And if anyone's interested in creating a brand or, creating a website logo, if anyone is interested in sort of brand design for themselves personally, please reach out to me. I would love to work together. And you can also find me on social media at Heather Catania as well.
Awesome. So good to have you. And
Thank
thank you for coming on and sharing all of your journey as well as your genius, because this is really needed in the world. You and I have this similarity where we are both against copycat. Copycat, cookie cutter, anything.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's time to just, right? Like move or lead with your authenticity, with your authentic self, because no one, even if you're copied in the world or you're copying someone else, it will never hit the same way. And so just this is this, especially now as we go into like, towards 2027, everything like authenticity is really so resonant. People can really feel that. And so, yes, just owning that and harnessing it is a superpower.
Yes. So good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And I will see you next time on
Yeah.
Euphoric Evolution Podcast.